Evening everybody, it is Tuesday 24th of May, new surroundings. I've moved away from the kitchen and we're going to go for a run of American whiskies. Getting a bit bored of doing Scotch. The black and white theme lasted for 3 whiskies and then I kind of ran out of that, so we'll do a bit of an American. Now the first one I'm going to do purely because I've got quite a few American whiskies to be getting on with, and it was simply because somebody that I've encountered on Facebook, a woman called Ruth Ashton Ward, had a version of WhistlePig yesterday, and it was like, oh, do you know what, I'll start with that one. And it's also kind of reminded me that I have neglected to mention in amongst my recommendations for other whiskey reviews to watch on YouTube, so Whiskey Wednesday, Mortimer Mike, that sort of thing. Whiskey Whistle, it's a guy called Mark. He's a Canadian living in Korea. I think he's Canadian, the accent certainly sounds it. If you're not Canadian, Mark, I do apologise, but he's based in Korea, and it's actually quite interesting because he can source some unusual whiskies but then also can't get hold of what you would consider kind of easy to get hold of standard bottlings. He's done a very, very good video on where to get whiskies in Korea, and he's actually kind of filmed it as like a video selfie going down the streets, and it's fascinating to watch that part of the world. Really, really interesting. So I highly recommend Mark's Whiskey Whistle channel. It's absolutely fantastic. So WhistlePig is a distillery that was set up by a guy called Raj Bhakta, and it's a converted barn in a farm, the WhistlePig farm in Vermont, which is here, and he has basically got hold of a guy called Dave Pickerill, who was previously a master distiller at Maker's Mark for 14 years, and so it's got a really good sort of market already in terms of having Dave on board has given it this kind of authenticity and provenance, because it's got this good name behind it. Now they only started distilling last year, I think it was November of last year, in the converted barn. So what they're doing is they're sourcing whiskies predominantly from, excuse me, I'm quite close to the floor, sourcing whiskies from predominantly the Alberta distillers for their rye whiskies, Alberta distillers in Calgary in Canada, and then bottling it at their farm. So that because they've only just started distilling, they haven't got anything to be making it with. So this is Canadian whiskey in Vermont. That makes sense? Yeah, sort of. Now I was making some notes and doing a bit of research on this, and literally in the last week it sounds as though it's all going tits up at WhistlePig. Raj himself has been unceremoniously kicked off the board of WhistlePig by some other people on the board. He's been accused of criminal activity and fraud, and it's things like, you know, driving while intoxicated and all sorts of crazy stuff going on. It's all a bit of a mess, so I'm not really going to delve into that because it's like lawsuit, countersuit, all this sort of stuff that's going on. So it's all a bit of a mess going on there, and it's kind of the dust needs to settle. So let's just look at the whiskey itself. So this particular one was donated by a guy called James Hope, who lives in Sheffield. I went round to his place and essentially helped myself to some whiskies that he got. Really, really nice guy. Thank you, James, for the donations. They're absolutely fantastic. And this particular one is the WhistlePig. It's actually called the WhistlePig 111, because it's 111 proof, so it's 55.5% ABV, and it's 11-year-old as well. So again, this is rye whiskey from Alberta Distillers in Calgary, which is here. Did I put Vermont up? I'm sure I put Vermont on. If I didn't, I'll do it now, but if not, if I've done it already, I will do. Head's a bit screwy at the moment. So yeah, so it's an 11-year-old rye that is 111 proof, so 55.5% ABV. So lovely. There's a lovely fruitiness on it as well. I'm really sorry, but I'm kind of like kneeling on the floor here, and it's really hurting my feet. So I'm trying to kind of not go down there, but not get too high. So I'll do that. How does that work? Yeah, that doesn't really work. So there's a nice raisiness to this, but it's like a concentrated raisiness, and there is also there's the dryness of like a really dry white wine, and a nice fragrance to it. But yeah, it's like a really concentrated. It's like concentrated raisin, so kind of like like squeezing everything down and then really kind of pulling that flavour, that nose together. It's a lovely nose. It's not too spirity. If it was a little bit harsher, it would be quite spirity, but it's just the right side of very, very pleasant. That raisiness continues through. There's a little bit of firiness to it. You would expect that at 55.5, but it doesn't necessarily need any water. There's a really good finish to it as well. There's a slight rumminess to it, and plums and damsons and kind of dark stewed fruits, and it's a stewed fruit flavour as well. It's very fruity indeed, but the firiness in there of the alcohol is actually complementing it really, really nicely. Now this is what the bottle looks like, and I think it was a limited edition of 1100 cases, kind of continuing on the one themes, but it's 1100 cases, so I think that's a case of 6, so it's actually 6,600 bottles. Whiskey Exchange and Master of Malt have got it listed, but as showing us sold out or discontinued. I did find it on essentially it's like an auction site, but it's not necessarily going for auction. They do get hold of red bottlings, and they were selling it for £100. I think Master of Malt was selling it for 114, so it's on the pricey side. Obviously it's kind of American whiskey coming over to the UK. Likewise, if you're in America, Scotch and that lot are a lot more expensive, so there's probably that exporting cost as well as the rarity of it and the fact that it's limited edition. Whether it's worth that amount of money, I think it's probably a bit steep for that amount of money, but it's still a cracking whiskey. I really, really am enjoying this. I've had some rye before where they're really quite dry and quite tight, almost like a grain whiskey that's just the wrong balance, but this has got a fantastic amount of fruit in. Really, really nice, really flavoursome. Might need a drop of water in. I'm not going to add any water in it because I personally don't think it needs it, but I think you might prefer to add a few more drops in. It might release that fruitiness to it. There's probably some people that are watching this now going, well, why don't you put any water in? Truth is, I haven't actually got any water on me. I could go to the tap, but that would be tap water. I haven't really got any filtered water at the moment because I'm not in the kitchen. But I'm really, really enjoying it as it is. I'd be very, very interested to see what the other WhistlePigs are like. If that's an indication of the quality that they're picking, because they're not actually making this, they are selecting this and picking it. They're actually doing a really, really good job, and I'm sure that is the work of the Dave Pickerel, who knows what he's doing clearly. And interestingly, I would much rather have this than Maker's Mark. Maker's Mark was a bit too fiery for me. This is the right side of the fieriness, whereas Maker's Mark was too rough and too harsh. This is actually on the fruity side with that bite that's actually supporting it rather than killing it. I recommend that, and I would certainly go out of the way to find any other WhistlePigs because I'd be very tempted to try some more of those. Okay, I'll do a quick rinse out in the tap, and I shall see you in the next one. Cheers.